This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Well, I'm joined today in person by Oliver Friesen, the CEO of Guardian Metal Resources. Oliver, good to be seeing you again in person. How are things?
Things are well. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Last time we were together was obviously in New York for the...
It was. Now we're in London.
And now we're in London, yeah, in the Power and Golden Guardian Metals office.
Yes,
yeah.
correct, yeah.
So some significant news out this morning. In fact, you said outstanding tungsten mineralisation at Desert Scheelite, which the company believes will deliver a material upgrade to the resource. Mm-hmm. So, using big words again, Oliver.
Well, I don't use those words very often. Outstanding. Actually, I think it's the first time we used outstanding.
Right, okay.
You might have to go back and look, but I'm quite confident that is the case.
Okay.
And it's exactly that. Just under 40 meters on a tungsten or copper equivalent basis, which I think is helpful for investors to understand kind of how all these metals play together. We're at just over 1% tungsten equivalent. And just under 3.5% copper equivalent when you account for the silver, the copper, and the tungsten and the zinc altogether. So yeah, it's exactly that, and it's we'll go into more detail, but there's a lot of great reasons why we're so excited about this intercept.
Okay, so you said 1% tungsten and
just over 1% tungsten equivalent, so that includes the copper, the silver, and then on a copper equivalent, because a lot of investors just understand copper a bit better, it's just a nudge under 3.5% copper equivalent.
Right, okay, well that is good, isn't it, as a grade there. Yeah. So, I mean, that's obviously that hole that's turned that up effectively, and these are the ongoing holes and assays that are sort of continually coming through.
Yeah.
You're probably going to get standout ones, probably going to get ones that don't have much in, and probably ones that kind of add to the picture. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way it works, Mark, is we have the existing resource, right? And the way the resource is sort of built out is the engineer and the resource geologist. They take all the existing data, all the historical results, all the Thor results, everything that's ever been drilled, and they build a 3D model based on the results from those holes. But what we're doing now is confirmation, upgrade, and infill drilling. So we're looking at areas of the deposit that have very low drill density. So what will happen is, say there's two holes that are 50 meters apart, the model will extrapolate based on where those two holes are and what they hit. But geologically, a lot can happen in a space of 50, 100 meters. So as you mentioned, a lot of the holes we're going to drill through the existing block model, and we'll probably more or less confirm, hopefully upgrade and increase the grade and length of that intercept. Lots of the holes will just do exactly that, increase our confidence in the resource. But what we're really looking to do is, because this deposit, there's so many areas that haven't been drilled very densely, we can get really amazing surprises like this, which is, we expected sort of 0.1, 0.2, and there's a figure 2 in that RNS, which shows the block model and where this drill result kind of comes across. And you'll see there it's sort of 1.1, 0.2 based on some of the kind of the nearest drill holes. But sure enough, to hit just under 40 meters of over 1% tungsten equivalent is a massive upgrade to what was believed to be there previously, which is exactly why we're doing this work.
Right, okay, so it's not necessarily about, you've already got the discovery effectively. It's not about, it's not about finding it, it's not about,
No, it's there.
It's there, it's now about proving up the model effectively, the resource model.
Yeah, exactly.
To infill drilling and building out the block model, as you call it, But you're still looking for the sort of the feeder system, the porphyry system, or is that less important?
It's all important. It's a good problem to have as a geologist, which is there's probably 5 or 6 really excellent targets I would love to drill. If I could have 2, 3 rigs on site right now, I would. That is expensive, obviously, and we need to be mindful of that. So we have the one drill rig on site, so we're trying to manage where do we put that drill rig. And obviously with this result, which was a surprise based on what we expected, we've moved the rig back to that location.
Right.
And we're testing for extensions of that zone in multiple directions. But the feeder system, the porphyry, we've confirmed a moly-rich porphyry, which is the causative porphyry for at least Desert Scheelite. That's a huge part of this story too. But the reality is, it's becoming so clear to us that the tungsten that we have in the ground at Pilot Mountain and in Desert Scheelite, it's critical we get that as close to production or development as we can, because the US needs a domestic source of tungsten. And we have what's believed to be the largest deposit. It's, as far as I know, the most advanced, and we're the only publicly traded company which is focused on US tungsten. And with speculation of an import ban coming from China on tungsten, there's a lot of important macro catalysts. So we're really trying to focus, along with everything else, getting this deposit as close to production or construction ready as we can in the shortest amount of time.
And what does that look like then? When to get it to as close to production ready as you can, what does that actually look like?
I mean, there's a long list of steps. So the PFS is sort of the next important milestone. But to do a PFS, I mean, just to be clear, we could go and do a PFS with the data we have right now on the project. It's advanced enough. But when we spoke to the engineers, we said, hey, we want to deliver a much more defensible and robust PFS, which means we can add a lot of new data, hydrogeological, metallurgical data, geotechnical data, that right now the data is there that confirms the sort of the story, but by spending a bit more money and advancing some of these studies effectively, the PFS can become much more defensible. So what's the overall process like? I mean, there's probably a list, an Excel sheet of 50 things I could send you if we need to do this, and this in this order. But what we know are the next 12 months, what that looks like, what the PFS requirements are, and we're going and checking those off as they come to make sure we can get the PFS done, and then following that, the next steps to get this as close to production.
It might be good to put that out actually, because I'm sure, I'm sure investors following the story would be ticking each one off. You know,
absolutely. And the garnet, those studies, that's another important box that's empty right now. But then once we get the results, we can check that off, and that all gets incorporated. So there's, if you go back and look at all the news we put out, we kind of outline what a lot of those steps are. There's a lot more. We've talked about the environmental baseline, that's ongoing as well as we speak. So there's a lot to do, but we have the team that knows how to do it, and it's just a matter of spending the time and going through all the steps now.
And at what point do you get that interest from government, Department of Defense, what have you? Is it upon PFS publication?
I guess the question,
it could come at any time, I suppose.
For sure. I mean, it's really about, it's kind of hard to answer the question. What we have right now is enough, and the stage we're at is more than enough. Typically, the government, they're less interested in earlier stage projects. If you have, say, maybe one drill hole, and you need to build a resource, right? So we have the mineral resource estimate right now that we inherited. This drilling we're doing now is part of upgrading that, infilling that, as I mentioned, the environmental baseline. So the project is advanced enough where the government can say, hey, you have something of significance here. In the case of tungsten, this is important and really important right now to US national security. So it's where we need it to be for government interest, and we've talked about our ambitions to get money through the Department of Defense, and that continues to progress in the background, and looking at other agencies and saying, hey, as much money as we can get access to, it just means we can get this to production in a shorter amount of timeline, supporting the US national security interests.
Okay, good. You mentioned molybdenum-rich mineralized porphyry system, and that was obviously mentioned in the RNS.
Yeah.
Just explain what that is in layman's.
Yeah, so it's, when you look at porphyry deposits, there's a spectrum, right? There's so many different chemistries that can be associated with a porphyry. Reason being, as these porphyries are forming, it's these large kind of magmatic intrusions that rise through the crust and through the subsurface. So they can melt different parts of the crust. I'm getting a bit technical, but it's important. And the chemistry can change. So you can find a porphyry that is just copper. You can find porphyries that are copper or molybdenum. There's typical metals that are associated with certain types. Like there's kind of a few important types, but there's always variations. I mean, geology is the possibilities are endless, right? I mean, geology it doesn't care what we think, right? We're just trying to figure out what has happened over time. But when it comes to the different porphyry chemistries, there's molybdenum-rich porphyries, and that's what we've found. At least within the one drill hole. Now, this is a big target, and this is one drill hole, and I encourage you to go to our website and our RNS, which has a plan map showing where this hole is, and you'll see this is a needle in the haystack. But we've hit 400 meters of moly-rich mineralization alteration, so we've confirmed the presence of a moly-rich porphyry, and now it's a question of where do we go from here, right? Because these systems, not only are they so diverse chemically, but this is a big system, and the different shells can be massive as well, and we found that out with a 400-meter intersect. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there.
So it explains the system that's there, which helps you in your understanding of the project.
It helps describe the chemistry of this particular porphyry.
Right.
Now, like I said, there's a lot of copper across the property. We hit, I think it was in the 40-meter interval, it was just about a 0.5% copper. So the skarn that we're drilling right now at Desert Scheelite, which is associated with the porphyry, is copper rich, which means the porphyry typically will have a lot of those metals of interest that you find in your skarn deposits. So we found a moly-rich shell right now, but further drilling that could change.
Okay.
There could be copper shells, there could be silver shells. That's the way these porphyry systems form. It's a bit complex, and I see you kind of nodding and smiling.
Yeah.
But right now, it was a moly-rich interval, so
Sure.
we're going off that, and then we'll look at what the rest of the system could look like as drilling progresses.
It's probably, it's less important for your sort of investor to understand that, I suppose. It's more for a technical and geological point of view.
It's important because moly has always been a metal of interest at Pilot Mountain, because there is moly in the actual skarn.
So it could be a moly play as well as a tungsten play.
Exactly. That's what we're trying to point at, is the fact that we have tungsten. That's the most important metal of interest right now. But there's copper, there's silver, there's zinc. We've alluded to the fact that we're doing some fire assays to see if there's gold potential. There's garnet, and now moly, which is, as I think some investors have picked out, quite a valuable metal. I think it's about 6 or 7x in terms of per pound of moly versus copper. So it's a great metal to find. There's actually a lot of interest in moly right now.
Right.
So, a lot of work to be done. This is just one drill hole into a big system, but that's what we know so far from the results from that area.
Pilot Mountain could, tungsten's the flagship, but a nice portfolio of metals, minerals there that you could.
At the end of the day, if we are successful in getting this into production, all of those metals matter.
Yeah.
Because yes, the DOD and the government, they want the tungsten because that's what they need for the military. But there's always a buyer for silver, always a buyer for copper, always a buyer for zinc, always a buyer for gold, always a buyer for moly. So it's important that we investigate everything, because when we do a PFS, the more metals of interest we can add and show that they can be recoverable, overall affects the economics, which is what we're looking at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Oliver. There's a couple of questions from Telegram this morning, and you mentioned garnet there, and I think you mentioned you were going through the process, and garnet is part of that.
Yeah.
So that's an ongoing
that work is ongoing, 100%.
Okay. Garfield.
Yeah.
Anything you can report on Garfield? I know this is obviously about Pilot Mountain, and that's not something to sniff at, but investors want to know any updates on the timeline for garnet findings.
Oh, the garnet findings or Garfield?
Garfield.
Garfield.
Yeah.
We love Garfield. The latest that we've sort of spoken about publicly is the finalizing of the drill pad locations, and that's still ongoing.
Yeah.
I kind of at the start said, if I had 3 or 4 drill rigs, I would have one of those would be at Garfield, without a doubt.
Okay.
I'd have probably 3 at Pilot, 1 at Garfield, and that would move to Gold Con. So it's obviously we're not in that position. We're mindful of delivering really high impact drill holes for the market. So Garfield continues to be an asset of interest. There's been, I think we've discussed previously, there's interested parties in Garfield. There's good copper porphyry targets and properties are really hard to find. And especially in the US, they're in very high demand. So we're not, rushing to go and JV it out or sell it. We want to do the right deal for it. In an ideal world, we would go and drill that ourselves. But at the same time, as you can probably expect, and investors can probably expect, the tungsten component of Pilot Mountain is gaining a lot of steam. And there's a lot of important reasons why we want to progress that. And if we're out drilling at Garfield when we could be drilling 40 meters of just over 1% tungsten equivalent at Pilot, well, we need to explain why that is.
Yeah, you've got to justify what you're
doing.
And
we're only a certain size. We only have a certain size of team, and we're very mindful of how we allocate our funds. So the drill pad preparation that's ongoing. Next step will be to submit a notice to the BLM. We've talked about potential for exploring Garfield after Pilot during the winter months because it's a lot more accessible of a property, but we haven't announced anything yet. Yeah. So it's just a lot of balls we're trying to juggle here, and obviously the tungsten component, especially with speculation of an export ban out of China coming sometime this year. You can imagine that a lot of people in the US are looking to us and going, we need tungsten from Pilot Mountain sort of as soon as possible. So that's what we're trying to manage right now, I guess.
Okay.
And Garfield remains a priority. I want investors and listeners to absolutely know that.
But you're hearing that from people on the ground. We need tungsten as soon as possible.
I mean, yeah. I mean, just we've talked about the data points, but the U.S. has no domestic production. The U.S. just slapped 25% tariffs on Chinese exports. As of January 1st, 2027, DoD imports from China are banned. And then there's speculation ultimately of what would be the biggest catalyst here, which is an export ban out of China, which may or may not happen. We'll see. But we've seen what's happened to the antimony space in the wake of that ban. And there's a lot of reasons why there's speculation that China will do the same with tungsten as a direct shot to the U.S. military.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple of questions. With Porphyry South proven to be an MO-type porphyry, it isn't the source for Desert Scheelite tungsten skarn. So where is the tungsten source? Are you still trying to find it? Could a deeper drill into DS find it underneath?
Good question. So there is tungsten in Porphyry South. It's moly rich, but there are, like for instance, there was a few very high silver results from that. In this RNS, we can only cover so much.
Sure.
And I could put out probably a 20-page RNS with all the results, but we just kind of give investors and listeners the highlights. There's silver-rich sections that we've intersected. We put out photos of scheelite within that actual porphyry. The first, I think, porphyry RNS had some photos of scheelite, so there's tungsten-rich intervals as well. But I think the investor made a good point there that, yes, there could be a shell that's just tungsten-rich. Because when you have a skarn, we know the metals we have in the skarn, you typically would expect to find similar metals in the causative porphyry because those fluids are coming off the porphyry forming your skarns. Now, sometimes what can happen is, say there's tungsten in the porphyry, it can fully leave the porphyry, be found in the skarn, and there's none left in the porphyry. But typically, it's a bit dumbed down, but there's metals that are typically left behind in some capacity, so you'll see evidence of that. But yes, with further drilling, there's certainly potential for a tungsten-rich shell, considering how much tungsten we have at Desert Scheelite.
Okay, and there's a question here, holes 8 to 11, are they still to be released, or there was nothing significant to report in them?
I believe those were released as well. So some of the way the drilling works is there's certain areas where we need to close off the resource as well. So a lot of the holes as we drill them, we know they're not going to be 40 meters at just 39.3 meters of 1% tungsten equivalent. It's sort of just to say, let's confirm that this part of the deposit is kind of where it ends in a certain direction. There's, once again, every drill hole hit tungsten intervals. Now we kind of just include the highlights, and I can maybe look at doing a more in detail technical breakdown, which includes a lot of the other copper hits and zinc hits that weren't we just focused on the tungsten really in this RNS, but there's a lot of zinc hits, silver hits, moly hits that we didn't really, we just don't have enough bandwidth to cover in one RNS. But those holes would have been reported. So we've reported from hole 1 up to hole 13 now. We're on hole 25 now, which is back at the zone we've just discovered. I'm going to be heading to site on Friday to see the core that we just announced, but also the core coming out of the ground from this new zone. So I'm really looking forward to that. I saw it, we got the results. I'm like, I gotta go. I gotta see this core, and there's a bunch of other stuff I gotta do there. But and then with the rig back on that area to see what's coming out there. So, but yes, there's a lot of other results that we just didn't have enough space in the RNS to cover effectively.
And the drilling continues to go on throughout the end of the year.
We haven't announced an end, so until I do,
until you do,
it's ongoing.
When would you want to start the PFS ideally?
When do we want to start it? Well, we're starting it now, right? This drilling is part of it. Right? The environmental baseline that we're doing is part of it. There's a few other steps that, like for instance, geotechnical drilling will do at a time that makes sense. So it's the whole list is there. We're looking for also government support on some of those more expensive work streams. So we probably wouldn't start those until we have some confirmation of that. Because we don't want to foot the bill ourselves, or we don't want to spread ourselves too thin, obviously, and we're always mindful of dilution and doing capital raises that make sense. But all this stuff is part of the PFS, just to be clear.
So you'll hopefully get some funding from the government to do elements of the PFS.
Yes, ultimately. Yeah.
When would you like the PFS out, ideally? H1, H2?
We're targeting sort of Q2, Q3. next year.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we put in the public domain.
Okay.
But it's not like we're just gonna be quiet until that comes out.
Sure,
All
of
of
course,
these
yeah.
check boxes, the garnet, the drilling, and the environmental.
Yeah.
As we get those results, we release them,
Yeah.
and that starts to build the picture for the market
Sure.
and what to expect in the
Sure.
PFS.
Okay. Well, just a final thought then, this question here was, from the recent assay results, what has surprised you, Oliver, the most with regards to quality of grades and metals found? And then just one from me, you've mentioned drill rigs a couple of times. Are you going to get another one, a second one, a third?
What surprised me the most? I would say the width and the grades. 40-meter intersection of continuous mineralization is not common. That's a big zone. I mean, you imagine if we laid out 40 meters right now, and I'm going to go to the site and look at the entire interval, and it's going to take up a whole bench, right? So it's a big interval, and that's key for size of the deposit, because the more volume we can add, the better. I'd say what surprised me, not surprised me, I mean, it's a great deposit. And there's been fantastic intersections, which is why this asset is so important. But I think what surprised me was to get these type of grades in a zone where we expected low grades. Right? Because there's other fantastic drill holes all across the 400-meter long deposit. But there's zonation, right? So this is an area where we're like, okay, we'll just drill this hole and move on, and we'll just get, confirm the results that were there, 0.1, 0.2, and that's just a checkbox, and we are off to a zone that hopefully is confirmation of a more exciting area. So this was meant to be not really an exciting area. So to drill that and go, oh, wait a second, we've just found, based on those results, the best part of the deposit.
Okay, yeah.
Right? I mean, just based on the grade zone, it's the best intercept from Desert Scheelite ever in all the years that have been drilled. And there's been a lot of really good holes. So to find that in an area where we didn't expect anything, that's why we do this, right? Because it's not just all drill and it's exactly what you thought. Geology never works like that. Sometimes there's surprises to the downside. But in this case, this is a
surprise to the upside.
Big surprise to the upside. To replace 0.1, 0.2 with 1.02% tungsten equivalent across that interval. And to see now how big that zone could be is obviously really exciting, and why I used outstanding in some of the words that I haven't used before.
Okay.
I encourage someone to go look and see.
There's been another adjective used, maybe not outstanding, but
maybe not. Maybe not. I think outstanding the first time we used that, but that's what this is. I was when I got those results, I was floored. I was really excited.
So it's turning up to be a lot better than you could have dreamed of.
I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, I mean, it's just like I said, it's an area that we expected sort of 0.1, 0.2 based on the existing block model, right? Because every drill hole that we're doing, we know roughly what we're going to find.
Yeah.
Because there's some holes that are typically not too far away, but it's still, there's a lot of areas that have never been drilled, and there's a huge potential to expand the resource to the east, to the west. It's never been drilled that deep. That's another option. You can drill down deep, and there's a whole different area, right? You never know until you go and do it, which is why this drilling is really exciting. And this is, hole 12, and we're on hole 25, and we're still drilling.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to come.
And would you get more drills than you think, or is that not?
Oh, to answer your last question.
Yeah.
I've spoken to the drilling company about that. There is the possibility for that. It's an important thing to consider there is bandwidth, right? We have a fantastic team right now, and it my background is in running drilling campaigns, so that's a lot of time is spent putting the right people in place and making sure this program is running efficiently, on time, on budget, all those type of things. If we double the amount of drill rigs, it just becomes more of a complicated program. I've been involved with many programs that were 4+ drill rigs, but it's a budget thing, right? Obviously, if we're drilling with 2 rigs, we need to not only double the size of the team. Maybe not fully double, but there's synergies. But we need to grow the team. We need to find good people, and I have good people now. And you don't want to bring in people that maybe aren't the best for the program. So we're considering it, and at the same time, it's also about spending money. We just did a raise, a strategic raise. We brought in $2.75 million US. So we're actually in a really comfortable and safe and good financial position. Yeah. But we want to make sure that we have runway for 18 months.
Sure.
I'm always looking out ahead, right? So I'm looking at non-dilutive government grant funding to fund a lot of these important things. And the raises we've done, there's a lot of time and effort that go into those. We've done no brokered raises, right? A lot of UK companies, they go to their broker and say, hey, go find me $1 million, right? We haven't done that. We did 2 strategic raises with one investor, and then we did the US strategic raise. And so our financial position is fantastic. But until you have kind of 10, 20 million bucks in the bank, you still have to be mindful about how you spend money.
Yeah, not getting too far ahead of yourself. Yeah.
Exactly.
Carried away on some early great results, and
Exactly. We're the drill rig runs 24/7. We have it for as long as we need, so we'll continue to hammer away, test Desert Scheelite, test these other zones once those results come in. Winter is a great time to drill Garfield potentially, or Pilot Mountain. So there's a lot of options we're considering in the second rig. But we, like you said, we want to be mindful of how we kind of manage the next kind of 12 to 18 months.
Okay. You said you're going out to site end of the week, so hopefully we can catch up. I'm sure you'll be putting out images on the social media, but
yes,
I'm sure we can catch up. And of course, as I said, last time we spoke was in New York.
Yeah.
Any plans to sort of start marketing a bit more to the United States investors?
Yes, big time. Yeah. So our UK investors have been fantastic. We've built a really strong following here, and we're really grateful for all the support we've gotten here. But at the end of the day, this is a U.S. story, and this is something that Americans care about deeply. Yeah. They really, really do. When you talk about geopolitics, when you talk about national security, when you talk about the reliance on China, we here in the UK and as a Canadian, we understand the importance for the American public. But we actually aren't in that position, right? And actually we are. I mean, Canada and UK are allies to the US when it comes to supporting critical metals supply chains, right? So we understand the position, but really when I speak to Americans, they care about this issue deeply. So that's really the focus now. We're going to continue to work with Stockbox and make sure that our UK investors are apprised to updates. But going forward and really starting quite soon here, it's going to be you're going to see a lot of interviews with different people, different campaigns to focus on U.S. investors. The OTC volume has been picking up, but we haven't seen a day where OTC out-traded the UK. And if we do what we're planning on doing, that should become the norm. Right. Is the U.S. leading the charge? And so that's our goal, because the reality is there's I think about 50. I should know this. I live here. About 55 million people in the UK, ballpark.
Yeah,
around there.
Yeah.
There's 350 in the US, and they care so deeply about this type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot of marketing, a lot of trips out to the US. So it's a bit of a slow burn, but with some big news, some big catalysts that we're working on, we can kind of build on that. Lay the groundwork first, and then hopefully it will just take over in the US, and we're going to work really hard to do that.
Good, excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
And hopefully, we can speak in the next week when you're on site. But Oliver Friesen, CEO of Guardian Metal Resources.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like, or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.